All right, I am Marcus Trice, and I'm doing a short video on how to safely clear a firearm that you are potentially going to be working on as a gunsmith. Now, this is for the gunsmithing tool class, the lab component, or the lab, I guess. One of the things that, for demonstration purposes, this firearm is on my countertop. The slide is forward and the magazine is in it. We don't know whether or not it's loaded. I personally, when I take firearms from people, whether it's at the range or whether they give me something to maybe look at, I always request that the firearm be, the magazine be out of it. That is, if it has a retractable magazine, that the slide be back. If the slide's not back, a chamber flag in it, indicating that there's nothing in the chamber, and then I will take the firearm from somebody, because you want to treat every firearm as though it is loaded. Again, for this purpose, it's on the counter here, the slide's not back, the magazine's in it. Now another important step is you never want to point a firearm at anything that you don't intend to destroy. And that is very, very, very true. I've been around firearms for a long time, and my prior occupation, I can't tell you how many people have had accidental discharges. People that carry firearms on an everyday basis have had accidental discharges, and it was because they were not following proper safety rules. And again, not treating a gun as though it was loaded, and then pointing it in a bad direction and then discharging it. So next step is you want to know how to safely operate your firearm and how the safeties work. Now, this particular firearm, this is a CZ75BD. It does not have a safety on it. It has a decock on the top here. A lot of firearms do have safeties, external safeties, and they all really do work in a different manner. Some go down, some go up, some are on the slide, some are on the frame. So you really need to be familiar with that and how that works. It's very, very important. Some guns don't have safeties. Some have some sort of internal safeties. You know, as we know, the Glock is very famous for that. Always use appropriate eye care and ear protection. So I think people take that for granted. When you're working on a firearm as a gunsmith, you really should wear eye protection. I know that you're not at the range, but you know, when you're working on a firearm, you just never know what may come off of it, break off, whether it's a spring, come and hit you in the eye. Now, ear protection, you know, I have to say that I probably don't wear ear protection when I'm in my garage. I probably do have a very slight earbud in my ears, just listening to a very calming type of music. So I guess that could classify as an ear protection, but truly you do need to have ear protection and eye protection, and preferably in some sort of clothing protection too. Always keep the firearm unloaded until ready to use. Now, that's a huge one to me also. I know a lot of people who keep a firearm in their house loaded, or in their car loaded, unattended. And in the state that I'm in, if a juvenile gets hold of it and it discharges and there's some sort of injury, or maybe even not, just maybe some sort of destruction of property, you will be criminally responsible. So, you know, if you have a lot of guns and you leave even one loaded, and you put it in the safe and you forget about it, and you go back to it 2 years later and you forgot that it's loaded, and you pull it out thinking that all your guns are not loaded, and you pull the trigger, and then you have an accidental discharge, or really a negligent discharge. So I make sure that all of my guns are not loaded. If I'm not carrying it. If I'm carrying the firearm, yes, it's loaded. But if it's not loaded, if I'm not carrying it, it's not loaded in my house at all. And even though, again, I don't load any of my firearms, I go right back to the first rule. I always treat every gun, though, that it is loaded. Live ammunition is not allowed in the work area, and I agree. You know, when I'm at a range and I do instructing, I'm an NRA instructor. When I'm at a range, I make sure that there's a definite loading area, and then there's a firing area. And it's the same when you're working on a firearm. I have an area that's specifically for ammunition, nowhere near where I'm actually working on a firearm. I have a reloading station in my small garage space, and then I have my little firearms repair or building section, and then all of the ammo is in a different part of the room, locked up. So never use live ammunition to function check firearms. Only use snap caps or dummy rounds, and I have dummy rounds for almost every caliber, I think, especially of the weapons that I have, the firearms that I have, excuse me. I see people do it. They take a firearm and they put a live round in it and cycle it to see if it's working, especially after they've maybe done a field strip, and they're like, oh, let's see if it's working. And that's a bad idea, because if you put it back together wrong and something is not functioning correctly, and you cycle it, and that firing pin discharges, or activates and discharges the cartridge, then now you've got a negligent discharge again. So again, make sure that you never use live rounds in a firearm to cycle it and check it. Now with this particular firearm, and I'm assuming this is part of the demonstration, is for this one, when you have a firearm that you don't know if it's loaded or not, obviously again, or a firearm's loaded, but for this case, you want to be able to pick it up, point it in a safe direction. I have nobody over here, nobody. Maybe even tilt it down. Obviously you don't want to flag anybody with it. You want to go ahead and remove the magazine, and you want to inspect it, and it is empty, right? And then for this particular CZ35, it does not have a safety. It's just a decocker, so I cannot engage a safety on this firearm. Then I will pull the slide back and engage the slide stop. I will keep it in my workspace and not maneuver the gun around. I will maneuver around the gun. I will look down into the chamber. I will look down into the mag well. I will even take my pinky and just put it in there and make sure that there's nothing in that chamber or that barrel. Also, while I'm doing this, I want to keep all fingers away from the trigger. And unfortunately, my dog is barking in the background. Now the gun is safe to the gun is safe to dismantle, take into the workshop, and do a field strip, and then obviously whatever else needs to be done to it. But again, this is, to me, if somebody hands me a gun like this, I will take it. Hopefully they're not pointing it at you while they're giving it to you. Hopefully it'll be in a down position or in a safe position, pointing, that is. And they hand it to you, you would take possession of it, and obviously no fingers in the trigger holes. You look down into the mag well, and into the chamber of the barrel. And that concludes my how to safely clear a firearm.